All right, let's begin. We're about to run an audit. But forget about finances, forget about data. According to the material we're looking at today, this is an audit of your very self.
You see, the whole point here is to hold up a mirror. The source material is basically asking us to take a hard look at our own reflection and really truly question the nature of who we are. It's a personal challenge, right from the get-go.
And this is the central, kind of unsettling question at the heart of it all. The text immediately goes after a core assumption most of us just take for granted. The idea that our thoughts actually start inside our own heads. It asks, point blank, are they really yours?
And that brings us to the main thesis. The argument is that we're not these independent thinkers, cooking up original ideas. Instead, it says we're neural mirrors, fundamentally built to just reflect whatever's going on around us.
Now check out how the source defines our sense of self. It calls our belief in our own autonomy a pathological belief. Even crazier, it calls it the ultimate biological deception. The whole idea is that thinking our thoughts and desires are uniquely ours is just a massive misunderstanding of how we're wired.
So, how did we get here? Well, this isn't some new phenomenon. It has a deep evolutionary backstory. The text claims our mirror neuron system was originally a crucial tool for survival. We imitated to learn, to hunt, to bond. But now, in what the source calls the age of Leviathan, that same system has turned into a parasitic drain. We're just subconsciously soaking up all the anxiety and intellectual rot of the collective.
And think about how deep this influence really goes. It's not abstract. It's in the clothes you wear, the way you talk, your deepest fears, even the goals you're chasing. The source is arguing that the very thing you call yourself is actually built from all these outside reflections.
Man, this line from the source material just hits hard, doesn't it? It paints such a stark picture. The idea that our identity isn't some solid thing we built ourselves, but more like a borrowed shape, just pieced together from the fragments of everyone around us.
So if we're mirrors, just how reflective are we? Well, the source actually proposes a scientific way to measure this, something it calls the reflection coefficient.
Okay, I know this looks intimidating, but stick with me for a second. The source puts this formula forward to figure out our level of parasitic reflection. But really, at its core, it's just a battle between all the external noise bombarding you and your internal defenses against it.
Let's just break this down real quick. The top part of that fraction is all the external stuff hitting you. V is just the sheer amount of noise from your environment, and beta is your natural tendency to copy others. The bottom part? That's your defense system. D is how strong your own internal logic is, and chi is how good you are at filtering everything else out.
So what happens when you run the numbers? Well, the outcome is everything. If you have a high reflection coefficient, or gamma R, you're basically just a small piece of the collective's chaos. But if you can get a low gamma R, the text says you become a sovereign individual signal. You're an originator, not just a reflector.
And this all leads to two completely different destinies that the source describes. Depending on that reflection coefficient, you either become an echo or an architect. The fate of the echo, well, it's described pretty grimly. The reflective slave becomes this hollow shell filled with nothing but old echoes of trends and whatever the outrage of the week is. The source argues that this person has no solid core, no unique signal of their own.
But it's not all doom and gloom. There is a way out. The source doesn't just lay out the problem. It actually offers a solution to reclaim your sovereignty. It's called the decoupling protocol, and the whole goal is to go from being a mirror to becoming an anchor.
The protocol itself breaks down into 3 clear steps. First, you have to liquidate or get rid of all the reflections you've already absorbed. Second, you build up insulation against all the future noise. And third, you establish a solid, sovereign anchor inside yourself.
So what does that actually look like? Well, liquidation means you audit every single one of your desires and figure out if it's really yours. You're sealing the leaks of implanted wants. Insulation is about learning to just observe the world without automatically feeling what it feels. And finally, the anchor is about building an internal philosophy so strong and so dense that it defines you, no matter what's happening on the outside.
And this just perfectly shows the final contrast. The reflective slave stays stuck, an echo in a system the text calls a dying simulation. But the architect, they shatter the mirror. They don't just fix it, they reforge it into a lens, not to reflect the world, but to project their own clear sovereign signal onto it. Which, brings us right back to the audit. The source material leaves us with this final, really provocative question.
It demands a liquidation of the stolen self and asks us, point blank, to honestly figure out how much of our identity is just a leftover cache of social conditioning. And we end on this haunting, definitive statement. After you strip away all the reflections, all the borrowed ideas and fears, the text suggests that what's left, that core, sovereign self, is what it calls the archive. It is, in the end, your one true face.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore a really potent concept today, something that might even feel a little unsettling. It's all about the mind's journey, from being a passive mirror that just reflects the world around it, to becoming a sovereign architect, actively building its own reality.
And we're starting with a quote that just throws down the gauntlet. The idea that your thoughts, your desires, are truly your own. Well, the source material calls this the ultimate biological deception. That's a huge claim, so let's unpack it.
So how does a deception like this even work? Well, it's not some external conspiracy. It's actually baked into our own wiring. The source calls this our neural mirror, a fundamental part of our mind that, in the modern world, has basically been hijacked.
And this isn't just a metaphor. It points directly to our mirror neuron system. You know, evolutionarily, this thing was our superpower. It's how we learned to use tools, how we build societies, by imitating others. But what was once a tool for survival has now arguably become our biggest vulnerability.
Because think about it. In today's world, with all the noise, our brain isn't just mirroring useful survival skills anymore. Instead, it's become this parasitic drain, constantly and passively absorbing the background anxiety, the fleeting opinions, and the limitations of everyone else.
I mean, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It frames the unrefined mind as a biological sponge, just sitting there soaking up all the chaotic noise of a world that, frankly, benefits when you can't tell the difference between your own thoughts and the static outside.
Okay, so if that's the mechanism, then what's the diagnosis? Well, recognizing that you have a mirror is the first step. But we have to remember, wherever there's a reflection, there's also a shadow. The shadow of this unrefined mind is what our source calls the reflective slave. And the system that keeps it in chains? That's the Leviathan.
Now, the Leviathan isn't some shadowy figure. It's the whole system, mass culture, social media, the endless churn of norms. And its one goal is to feed your innate need to mirror things. It wants to keep your mind constantly occupied with its data, its noise, so you never have a quiet moment to find your own signal.
And how does it do it? Well, look at its tools right here. Trends tell you what you should want. Social norms tell you how you should behave. And the constant, never-ending outrage cycles, they burn up all your emotional energy, making sure you're too exhausted for any real, deep, sovereign thought.
So to make this less abstract, the source material actually gives us a conceptual formula for this. It's called the reflection coefficient. Now, don't get bogged down in the math, that's not the point. Think of it as a tool, a way to measure how much of you is really just a cast reflection of everything else.
Let's break it down real simple. The top part of the equation, the numerator, is all the external pressure, the volume of noise around you, and your natural tendency to go along with it. The bottom part, the denominator, that's your defense. It's the strength of your own internal logic and how good you are at filtering out the junk. The entire game is to make that bottom number as big as possible.
And that brings us to the most important question you can ask yourself, the one that kicks off the whole journey from diagnosis to cure. It's not who am I, but rather how much of me is just a recording of everyone else. This requires a serious, radical self-audit.
So, we've diagnosed the problem. What's the fix? The source provides a clear, actionable framework. It's called the decoupling protocol. This is where we go on the offensive. The core strategy is all about this fundamental shift in your internal posture. To claim your own sovereignty, you have to stop being the passive, reflective mirror and start becoming the immovable, unshakable anchor.
And the protocol to get there is laid out in 3 distinct steps. It's a process. First, reflective liquidation. Second, cognitive insulation. And finally, building the sovereign anchor.
Okay, step 1, reflective liquidation. This is where you conduct an absolutely ruthless audit of your own desires. For every single goal you have to ask, is this really mine, or was it just implanted in me by someone else's expectations? If a goal can't survive in total silence, you have to seal that leak. Next, step 2, cognitive insulation. This is all about practicing what the text calls the internal vacuum. You learn to observe the signals from the outside world, but you consciously refuse to resonate with them.
Picture a lead wall between the data coming in and your emotional reaction. You can see it, you can analyze it, but you don't let it vibrate through you.
And that leads to the final step, building the sovereign anchor. This is the end game. This is where you construct an internal framework, a logic so strong and so dense that it defines itself no matter what environment you're in. Your inner architecture becomes the light that defines the mirror, not the shadow that gets trapped inside of it.
So what happens when you actually succeed? What's the ultimate result of this protocol? What's the final form you take? The source calls this apotheosis, becoming the sovereign architect.
And here the stakes couldn't be clearer. The source lays out two possible fates. By age 45, the reflective slave wakes up and realizes they're just a hollow vessel. Nothing more than a collection of cached echoes from other people. No core, no signal. They aren't an architect, they're just a feedback loop in a dying simulation. But the sovereign architect? They've achieved total decoupling. They're a master of their own mind.
This quote just perfectly captures that final transformation. You've mastered the law of your own cognitive reflection. The passive mirror is totally shattered, but its pieces are then reforged into a powerful lens, a lens of absolute clarity. You no longer see the world as it's shown to you. You see the world as you have architected it to be.
And this all brings us to the final, concluding mandate from this incredibly powerful text.
This is it. This is the ultimate declaration of cognitive sovereignty. It means you've successfully exited the collective noise, that simulation of the many, and in its place, you've established your own unique, undeniable signal. It's set in stone.
And we end on this final, almost cryptic mandate. It leaves us with a lot to think about, doesn't it? What it means to build an internal reality, an archive, so deep and so true that it becomes your authentic identity, completely and forever independent of any external reflection.